When a workplace conflict over tone and professionalism escalates to HR, one employee's attempt to create a healthier environment unexpectedly reshapes the entire department. What begins as a complaint about respect turns into termination, promotion, division, and a hard look at leadership, accountability, and the real cost of speaking up. Here's the original email. AITA for going to HR about a coworker who keeps publicly putting people down. I am 31F and work in a mid-sized marketing department. For the most part, I like my job and my team, but there has been ongoing tension because of one coworker, Dan 34M. Dan has a habit of correcting people in group emails in a way that feels less like helping and more like making a point. If someone makes a small mistake, even something minor like a typo or a slightly off date, he replies to the entire department, including our director. His responses are blunt and often condescending. He does not just fix the issue, he highlights it. A few weeks ago, I sent out a draft campaign timeline and accidentally listed the wrong date for one milestone. Within minutes, Dan replied to everyone with something like, "This is incorrect. Basic details like this should be verified before sending to leadership." He then restated the correct date underneath it, as if he were issuing a correction in a newspaper. I felt embarrassed. It could have easily been a quick message to me directly. Instead, it was framed in a way that made it look like I was careless and he was stepping in to save the situation. It has not just been me. I have seen him do this to at least 4 other people. He will often preface things with comments like, "for future reference," or as a reminder to the team, and then point out someone's mistake in front of everyone. The tone is not neutral. It feels like he is establishing authority. After one incident, a newer team member was visibly upset and said she felt stupid for even speaking up in meetings because Dan tends to interrupt and correct people mid-sentence. He often phrases things like he is the only one thinking clearly in the room. I decided to speak with him privately. I told him that while accuracy is important, the way feedback is delivered publicly can feel humiliating and unnecessary. I suggested that smaller corrections could be handled one-on-one. He responded that if people are embarrassed by being corrected, that is a performance issue. He said visibility creates accountability and that he refuses to lower standards to protect egos. The way he said it made it very clear he sees himself as the standard. After that conversation, nothing changed. If anything, it felt like he doubled down. In a recent meeting, he interrupted a colleague and said, "Let me clarify so we do not confuse leadership," and then Ray explained her point almost word for word. At that point, I went to our manager. I explained that this pattern feels less like collaboration and more like a power move that undermines people publicly. I did not ask for him to be punished. I just asked for clearer expectations around feedback and communication. Management involved HR to facilitate a conversation about team dynamics. Now Dan is upset. He has told at least one coworker that I am trying to silence him and that high performers are always targeted for being direct. He has also implied that I escalated because I could not handle being corrected. Part of me wonders if I should have just ignored it. He is not yelling or using profanity. He is technically correct most of the time, but the delivery feels intentional and strategic, like he is positioning himself above everyone else. I believe workplace conflict should be handled professionally, and that includes not using public corrections as a way to assert dominance. But maybe I escalated too quickly. AITA for going to management, and HR, instead of just accepting that this is his communication style. Sincerely. Frustrated and confused. Cordelia's response. First off, I want to tell you that I felt your email. Not in some dismissive, get over it kind of way, but in a deep, dark corner sort of way, the sort where something that's been eating at your chest finally gets whispered out into the open, and it feels both terrifying and relieving at the same time. Workplaces can feel like battlefields sometimes, not because we're all sloths hiding under keyboards, but because people matter. We bring our quirks, our vulnerabilities, our pride, and our exhaustion into a space that's supposed to be about teamwork, And when someone uses their words like a sword instead of a tool, it bruises. What Dan is doing, calling out mistakes publicly with that tone of "I am right and you are lesser," that's not professionalism. That's power play with a grimace. It's the sort of thing that doesn't just correct, it shames. It makes people want to hide drafts instead of submit them. It makes hearts start beating too fast before hitting send. That is not harmless directness. That is fear dressed up as authority. You tried to approach him privately. You tried to communicate like a grown-up in a world that desperately needs more grown-up convo. You didn't go to HR to ruin him. You went to HR because the atmosphere had gotten heavy, oppressive, and frankly, toxic. You did it because you care about your coworkers feeling safe and respected, not just corrected. There's a big difference between helping someone grow and making them feel small. Your intention wasn't to silence directness, it was to ask for empathy. To ask for a workplace where precision and kindness both thrive. That is not weakness. That is courage with a spine. Now, will HR and management handle this delicately? That's on them. Communication expectations should be set, and that includes tone, empathy, and respect. Does this make you for addressing patterns that affect morale? Absolutely not. You are not asking for censorship. You are advocating for professionalism with humanity, and in most sane workplaces, that's not something to be punished or dismissed. Stand firm. Stand tall. You brought this up not because you can't handle correction, but because you, like many of us, understand that how we speak to one another matters just as much as what we say. Even in storms, sunlight finds its way through the cracks. Stay true to your voice. Cordelia. Original author's reply. Update. Things blew up and now I think Dan might actually get fired. I did not expect things to escalate this far. After I spoke to my manager and HR got involved, they scheduled a mediated conversation with Dan and me. The goal, at least on paper, was to align on communication expectations and reset the tone on the team. It did not go the way I hoped. During the meeting, HR explained that several employees had reported feeling undermined by his public corrections, and that leadership wanted to reinforce constructive feedback practices. They were calm. They were not accusatory. They framed it around team culture. Dan doubled down. He said he refuses to participate in mediocrity management. He told HR that if people feel intimidated by accuracy, that is not his responsibility. At one point, he implied that the department's declining efficiency was due to lowering standards to protect fragile personalities. He also said he found it interesting that the people who make the most mistakes are the ones pushing for tone policing. HR tried to redirect. He interrupted them more than once. By the end of the meeting, the tone had completely shifted. What was supposed to be about communication became about insubordination. Afterward, my manager pulled me aside and said that this was not the first time HR had documented issues with him, and that this conversation may have serious consequences. Now rumors are flying that he has been put on a formal performance plan, and that termination is on the table if he does not demonstrate immediate change. And this is where things get messy. The department is divided. A few coworkers have quietly thanked me. One told me she finally feels like someone said what everyone else was thinking. Another said she has been sleeping better knowing leadership is aware of the dynamic. But others are clearly angry. Two people who are close with Dan have started excluding me from informal planning conversations. Last week, I found out about an assignment I was supposed to contribute to only after it was already submitted. When I asked about it, I was told, "Oh, we assumed you were busy with HR stuff." Yesterday, I was added late to an email thread about a deliverable that had already passed its internal deadline. It makes me look disorganized, even though I was never looped in. I cannot prove it is retaliation. It is subtle, it is deniable, but it feels intentional. Now I am stuck in this awful space where if Dan gets fired, some people will absolutely blame me. If he stays, I worry the tension will get worse. I did not want someone to lose their job. I wanted the behavior to stop. I keep replaying everything in my head wondering if I should have just kept my mouth shut. For those who have been through workplace conflicts that escalated like this, how do you protect yourself when a team fractures? Do I document the exclusion? Do I confront it directly? Do I go back to my manager again and risk looking like I am stirring the pot? I genuinely wanted a healthier work environment. Now it feels like I am in the middle of a quiet civil war. Advice appreciated. Cordelia's reply. This is the part no one prepares you for. The part after you speak up. The part where the air changes temperature and you realize accountability has a shockwave. First, let us separate something very clearly. You did not get Dan into trouble. Dan got Dan into trouble. HR did not move toward termination because you said you felt uncomfortable. They moved because when given the opportunity to course correct, he chose defiance. He interrupted them. He dismissed them. He framed basic workplace expectations as an attack on excellence. That is not your doing. That is a pattern revealing itself under light. When someone doubles down in front of HR, that is not bravery. That is ego refusing to bend. Now to the harder part. Workplaces fracture around power, not fairness, not truth, power. Some of your colleagues feel relief because the pressure valve has finally been opened. Others feel destabilized because the hierarchy they understood is shifting. Even if they did not love his tone, they may have relied on the structure he represented. When that structure shakes, people look for someone to blame. You are visible, so you become convenient. The subtle exclusion you are describing is not accidental. Information does not forget to include you twice in 1 week. Deadlines do not simply drift past your inbox. That is social retaliation in its quietest form. It is designed to be deniable. It is meant to make you question your own perception. So here is what you do. You document, calmly, neutrally, dates, threads, deadlines, no emotion attached, just facts. Not because you plan to wage war, but because clarity is protection. You also loop back to your manager, not with drama, but with professionalism. Something simple. I want to make sure I am aligned on assignments because I have noticed I was not included in a few recent threads, and I want to prevent missed deadlines. Frame it as process integrity, not personal grievance. Do not confront the retaliators emotionally. They are operating from loyalty or fear. You will not logic them out of that. You remain steady, predictable, professional. That consistency will speak louder over time than any whisper campaign. And hear me clearly on this. If Dan is terminated, it will not be because you exposed him. It will be because when leadership held up a mirror, he shattered it instead of looking. You asked for a healthier environment. Sometimes healing looks like rupture before repair. That does not make you the villain. It makes you the catalyst. Stand firm, not rigid, not defensive, just firm. And protect your paper trail. You are not in a civil war. You are in a transition. Those are uncomfortable. They are also revealing. You did not light the match. You pointed at the smoke. Stay steady. Final update from original author. Final update. Dan was terminated and now I have his job. I honestly do not even know how to write this without it sounding dramatic, but here we are. Dan was terminated last week. From what I was told, after the HR meeting, he was placed on a formal improvement plan that focused heavily on communication, collaboration, and adherence to leadership direction. Apparently, there was another incident shortly after where he pushed back on a senior manager in a way that was described to me as openly combative. By the end of the week, he was gone. The official message to the department was neutral. It thanked him for his contributions and wished him well. There was no mention of the HR situation, just a calendar invite for a brief team meeting and then silence. The room felt strange afterward. Some people looked relieved. A couple looked stunned. One person left immediately after the announcement. Then, 2 days later, my manager asked to meet with me. They told me that with Dan's departure, there was a gap in project oversight and cross-team coordination. They said I had demonstrated leadership during a difficult cultural moment, and that they believed I could step into a more formal coordination role. It is technically a lateral transfer. Same pay band, same level, But the title is fancier and the scope mirrors a lot of what Dan used to handle. More visibility, more ownership, more direct contact with leadership. I asked directly if this was because of what happened. My manager said no. They said this decision was about capability and trust. They also said that how I handled conflict showed emotional intelligence and maturity. I accepted. And now the department definitely thinks this was intentional. No one has accused me outright, but the shift in energy is noticeable. A few people have congratulated me warmly. Others have been polite but distant. One coworker joked, "Wow, that worked out well for you," in a tone that did not feel like a joke. I can almost hear the narrative forming. She escalated. He got fired. She got the job. The truth is, I did not ask for this role. I did not want someone fired. I wanted the public shamming to stop. I wanted the team to feel safe contributing. Now I am stepping into a position that used to belong to someone half the department was loyal to, and I am worried that every decision I make will be filtered through suspicion. At the same time, I would be lying if I said I was not proud. I worked hard. I have always taken on extra coordination quietly. Part of me feels validated that leadership saw that. So I guess this is less of an AITA question, and more of a how do I lead a team that might think I climbed over someone to get here question. How do I step into this role without looking like I orchestrated the outcome? And how do I prove that I am here to steady the ship, not to claim a throne? Cordelia's final reply. First, let me say this clearly and without any hesitation. Congratulations. A promotion, even a lateral one with a brighter title and greater visibility, is not an accident. It is not luck. It is not a rumor mill reward. It is leadership saying, we trust this person with responsibility. That matters. You earned that through consistency long before this conflict ever happened. Now let us gently address the part that is making your stomach twist. This outcome is not because you plotted. It is not because you won. It is because when leadership gave Dan an opportunity to recalibrate, he chose to escalate instead of reflect. In an HR setting, tone matters more than ever. That is the moment where humility is expected. When someone expects others to receive his corrections with professionalism, but refuses to receive feedback with the same grace, the imbalance becomes undeniable. You did not control his reaction. You did not control his defensiveness. You did not control his interruptions or his dismissal of the process. Those choices were his. Consequences flow from behavior, not from reporting behavior. It is very important that you do not absorb responsibility that does not belong to you. Now about the team dynamic. Yes, some people will tell a story in their heads. Humans are storytellers. When something shifts quickly, they look for a simple explanation. Over time, though, stories fade and patterns speak louder. If you show up steady, transparent, and fair, the narrative will correct itself. Not overnight, but it will. This transition will feel awkward for a while. Anytime leadership changes hands, even informally, there is a recalibration period. People test boundaries. They watch closely. They wait to see if power changes the person holding it. Your job now is not to prove that you deserve the role. Your job is to demonstrate through behavior that the team's success is your priority. Keep your communication clear and calm. Invite input. Share credit generously. Be consistent. Consistency is disarming. It signals safety. And please hear this gently. It will take time for the atmosphere to settle. Trust is not rebuilt in a week. But environments absolutely do improve when leadership models the tone they expect from others. That is how cultures shift, not with force, with example. You did not climb over anyone. You stood up for standards. Leadership noticed. That is not manipulation. That is alignment. Give yourself permission to feel proud. You handled something difficult with restraint. You did not retaliate. You did not gossip. You documented, you communicated, you escalated appropriately. That is maturity. Now you get to lead with that same steadiness. It will get better. It may feel tense for a little while, but if you remain grounded and fair, the department will adjust. People relax when they see stability. And you are stable. Take a breath. You earned this moment. I am genuinely proud of you. What do you think of this story? What would you do in this situation? To submit your own story, email CordeliaCrossblog@gmail.com.